I am so pleased to meet you, Philip Shepard, and I've been reading your book in the way that you said in the introduction you had constructed it.
Wonderful.
Not chronologically, but dancing around in it, reading a little of this, a little of that, and I find that everything that I've gone into, just a couple lines in, goes deeper and deeper, and it's captivating and takes me into a whole system of thought. It is not a light read, but
No.
It's a profound read and a very provocative book, which I think even beyond that, it's a necessary book and it's a life-changing book. And I want to thank you for writing it. Plus, you had an article in the Sun magazine, which is one of my favorite magazines because it's such a truthful magazine.
Yeah.
And I went recently to one of their workshops in the Smokies.
Oh, okay.
And I have them all stacked up. So when I read that one in August of this year, that was because Bruce Miller had suggested it. And I want to thank him for suggesting it, and thank you for being the person here tonight to talk to.
It's a great pleasure.
I want to go back and ask you, because you've gone, so much of your life has been experiential. I want to ask you, because you mentioned relationships and the importance of relationships, what were the relationships for you at the time you were a teenager and decided to leave on a bicycle to go to Japan and through England and all the places that you covered, journeyed?
I can tell you the relationship that most prompted that, in a way, was my relationship with my own culture, because I could feel the sort of subtext of my culture. It's like the adults in my world were inviting me to join this fantasy they were living out. And my thinking was sort of being funneled down these well-worn grooves. And I could feel it happening, and I fought it. And I was, as a teenager, I was sort of in this state of rage. And the origin of the rage was this sense that my being was under threat. And it was under threat by the institutions and givens and values of my culture.
Ideologies.
Mm-hmm. and you know, our culture's value. Our culture says up is down, up is good and down is bad, and it seems like such an arbitrary thing. And why isn't down good? Why isn't up bad? Right. So there's an arbitrariness to it, and so I felt trapped by these paradigms that I'd been nursed on since I was an infant. And I knew that the only way I was going to liberate myself from that was to leave. And so the bicycle, man, you head off on a bike and you're just alone in the world and open to it. And on that bike trip, I just passed through so many different ways of understanding what it means to be human, that the only time I really experienced culture shock was when I came home.
Mm-hmm. Isn't that something?
There's this stuff that I've grown up with since childhood. It's so familiar, and suddenly it's so bizarre and arbitrary. So that journey is what enabled me to ask the questions over the years that slowly peeled back the layers and let me see for myself what was happening around me.
But why the no? Correct me if I'm pronouncing it incorrectly, but the no theater. Why the no theater? What possessed you? Was it before you left on the journey that you were first beginning to think about that?
Yeah, it's part of I had to get out of my culture, and then there's, I was 18. There's the big wide world, and what in it really calls me, and it was no theater. And I'd seen a no play in Montreal when I was 17, and I'd studied the treatises of the guy who founded No Theater, and they knocked my socks off. And I thought, well, if he can write about theater like this, I better go see what he created. And so I went on a Greyhound bus to Montreal and saw this snow play, and it shook me to the core.
It's everything, isn't it?
It is
It's drama and
well,
energy.
It's
what do
different,
you say?
right? Because
Is it different?
kabuki is like
okay.
that. No is highly, highly restrained.
Oh, really?
They wear masks, so the face is restrained. Their movement is choreographed, so the movement is constrained. And what happens? The constraints of no theater are so designed that the terminus, the sort of end point, the destination, is almost out of sight, and you're feeling the form. It's like the human heart is opening against these constraints, and you feel it so clearly. So the journey is what matters, and the destination. I mean, there is no.
So is this part of what you've integrated in practices you do now? Because I know you're doing practices, and you did a workshop today.
Well, here's the funny thing. When I was a teenager, I was accepted at U of T to study physics. So there was that, and quantum physics had a hold on me. And then there was no theater. And I think when you come right down to it, no theater baffled me more deeply than quantum physics. And because I'd seen the finest theater that the English theater had to offer. I'd seen Ralph Richardson and John Gielgud in a play in London. And then here was no that moved me more deeply than that, and I had no idea how they'd done it. I had no idea how it had had this effect on me. So I went to Japan sort of to feel my way into that. And one of the things I discovered was the Japanese concept of Hara. So Hara is a Japanese word that means belly. But in the Japanese culture, it's recognized as the profoundest seat of our understanding and truth. So what was baffling me in no theater that I didn't understand originated in deep in the body, in the pelvic floor. They were moving and speaking from that place that imparted a grace and harmony and gravitas to everything that happened on that stage. And where was it coming from? I didn't know. So that was my introduction to Hara, and then Hara, coincided with the enteric nervous system, which was sort of rediscovered in the 1960s and made public in the 1980s, and all these things converged to trace out this journey that our culture made, starting in the sort of early Neolithic, when we were gathered around the mother and the goddess, and then we discovered agriculture, domesticated. We became doers. We, slowly relied increasingly on abstraction. Don't eat the seed now, save it, and we'll plant it in the spring. And what happened is at that point, we experienced our thinking in the belly. We were Hara-based. We were based in what I understand now to be the sort of female pole of our consciousness. And you can map out that migration that our culture underwent as we moved higher and higher in the body. So in Homer's day, we're in the chest. And Homer uses a word, phrene, that means mind and means diaphragm. And then, the Hellenic culture is poised between male and female, and then we completed the journey and we're up in our heads.
To the cranial position.
Yeah.
Into a very scary position in many ways.
Well, it's a disconnected
a disconnection.
Position. Yeah.
Yes.
And not to paint it black, it's something we needed to sort of flex that muscle of the male side of our consciousness. But what happened was it disconnected from the female.
Yeah.
Right? And in abandoning the female, it forgot the female. It forgot that other intelligence, and now it's sort of driven by abstract ideas that are disconnected from the pulse of the world that used to guide us.
It's separated and it's isolated, and it's, well, I keep thinking of meditation when they say the monkey mind, how it can get going and run us and control us. And for many of us, we have no understanding that we even have a choice between getting out of that and going somewhere else. We don't know how to step back and observe that crazy, constant patterning going through the mind or the brain and drop it down with breath or whatever. I'm not sure what some of your practices are, but we as individuals don't really know how to do that, to get into, as you put it, the other mind, the other brain, the other brain.
Yeah.
And in the beginning of your book, you also mentioned the gastrointestinal brain as well, 3 brains. So I'll let you speak to that.
Yeah, well, you know, the brain in the head, that monkey brain thing you talk about, we are cut off from the world's mindfulness to such an extent that all we have to think about almost is our own thoughts.
Yeah.
And we chase our thoughts around and we sort them and organize them and reorganize them. And there was a time in our culture when all of our thinking was done hand in hand with the world around us. And you look in, early Greek philosophy, Heraclitus actually talks about that. And it's not long after that Democritus comes along. And it's very clear that as far as Democritus is concerned, his thinking is his achievement, and it's something that he possesses. It's not something he possesses because it's a property of the world. It's something he possesses independent of the world. And that other place to drop down through the body and come to rest in the pelvic bowl brings you back to the place where you start to think once again, hand in hand with the world.
So in your book, New Self, New World, you speak about another way of being or living. Can you speak to that? What is that other way of being or living?
Yeah, what we're used to in our culture and what we encourage with our language and our customs and our values and our hierarchies and our architecture is living in the head. And we're even taught, our science is tainted with that, because neurologists will say, well, the brain is the whole personality, the brain is everything. And they're kind of neglectful of the fact, well, there is another brain in the belly, and there's another brain in the heart. And so to talk about the other way of living, we should recognize that when you live in the head, you're living in a somewhat disconnected realm, because you're sort of separated from those sensations of the body, and you can never be truly at rest, because the abstractions, you can't come to rest in your relationship with the world, so you have to keep moving and organizing and gaining perspective, doing. And so there's an anxiety that is fostered both by that continual movement and by the disconnection. And we're driven in our lives by a sense of lack, because we've disconnected from our being. And what we want in our lives is to experience our being. And so we're driven in ways that we're trying to fill that emptiness.
And void, yeah.
Yeah, so it's consumer society and the entertainment we go to and the addictions. I mean, we live in an addictive society. So what's the alternative? It's, when you recognize that the body has a heightened intelligence, it's a different intelligence. It's one that is attuned to the present and is informed deeply about the present, not by bits of information, but by direct experience. And so when you drop down and come to rest in the body, you overcome that horrific sense of being a spectator on everything. You overcome that sense of separation and alienation. You no longer, we spend so much of our lives directing ourselves and supervising ourselves and guiding ourselves, and that's a relationship of self-conflict, where one part of you is giving directions that the other part of you has to obey. So harmony isn't possible when you live in the head, but when you drop down into the body, you're dropping into a place of integration and relationship. And as you come into relationship, first with the whole of your being and also with the world around you, harmony takes on a value that for those living in the head, control has. So control is about order, right? And harmony is something else. Harmony is a yielding and a dancing and an answering to what the world is calling forth from you.
Well, when you work with people and bring them to these places, how do you do that? How are some of the practices that you use in
one of the things that I address, and we get there gently through a series of experiences, but one of the things that the paradigm we're stuck in is that paradigm of self-conflict, where there are two parts of us, at odds with each other. So there's an exercise I call the mirror exercise, and it's like a trap, right? So it brings up to the fore the separation between our thinking and our being, which is the primary schism we've created in ourselves. We think independent of our being. And it's a funny exercise because I ask it's a one-on-one exercise, and I ask the participant to mirror me, and I sort of go into a semi-squat, so they go into a semi-squat, and then they start speaking a prepared text. Everyone comes having memorized a text. So what's happening, and I see it clearly as I'm working with them, is their legs start to burn. There's all this energy down below, and meanwhile the voice is going, once upon a time, with, because the internalized job is to keep the thinking separate from the being.
Yeah.
That's what we've internalized, that paradigm. And so I point that out to them, and they acknowledge it, and they don't know how to join the two, and eventually they soften into it. And when they do, when that energy of the body rises up through the voice, and there's unison between the two.
They feel it, and there's a shift.
And their humanity shines, their energy sparkles. It's
That's
such
fantastic.
a beautiful thing. Yeah,
That's
it truly
very good.
is.
Havlan lachma de sunkanan yoma.
Sigh again.
Ah.
Let the words come out on that side.
Wash bochan kahayo bain wach the hain. I canad of kanan schwachin lahayo bain.
Good.
Wela talan nelasuna hela patsan menbisha.
And come back up. So there's an aspect of you that is committed to telling this in a certain way.
Mm-hmm.
And that structure can go to rat shit.
Ratchet.
If it need rat shit.
Oh, ratchet. I like ratchet.
It can just fall apart.
Yeah.
Right? It's not needed, because it's something that is independent of your wholeness in this moment,
Okay.
here now.
Should I start from the beginning?
Wherever you'd like.
Avunda Vashamaya.
Good. And drop out of your face.
Nakar
Allow your face to live down
Te
here.
Mal Kuta.
Yes.
Nahwe Sivyana Ikana
Good. See
Davashmaya
from here. Speak from here. Live from there.
Havlan Lachama de
Yes,
Sunkanan
good.
Yomana.
Ah! Good.
Washbuklan Kahalbane.
Good.
Hottehin.
Yes, yes, yes.
Ikana Defkanan
Yes.
Swachin Lahayobane.
Good.
Wela Tatlan Lenasuna.
I want to hear your legs. I want to that energy to live. I know. Let it
Ela
live.
Patsan.
Hi.
Matul Dalai Malkutak.
Good, 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 good.
Wahala
And
Watesh,
good.
thank you.
Good, good, good. So you're keeping the speaking together.
Yeah,
You're holding it together. We'll get through this.
yeah.
And what I'm saying is let it fall apart. So there's when I say you're holding it together, it's in a certain rhythm.
Yeah.
It's in a certain intonation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
So by holding that together, you're committing your breath and your senses to a structure that is kind of independent of what is happening now. Right?
Yeah.
Good. Good.
Yeah.
Let it just live here and now, as it needs to. Yeah. The breath drop in and release out. Ah.
Ah.
Good.
Avunda Vashamaya.
Good.
Netkad Shamach.
Good.
Te Malkuta.
Yes, one word at a time now.
Wela Tatlan.
Yes, let it come from that.
Lenasuna.
Yeah.
Ela
Yeah.
Patsan.
Let it come right from that energy and through you.
Menbisha.
Yes.
Wela
Yes.
Tatlan.
Yes.
Menbisha.
Yeah, now let it live.
Atul Delahe.
Yeah.
Malkutak.
Yes, yes,
Why,
yes,
hello,
yes, yes.
So you do a number of these? Are they like exercises primarily that you go through, or?
I teach a weekend workshop, and it's, for the most part, I talk about it like sandboxes. Like every exercise I set up, it's like a sandbox, and go and play, and there's no agenda. There's just go and play in this, see what you come up with, right? But each of the exercises is deliberately designed to help us inch towards our wholeness bit by bit. So there are exercises that give us permission to go into a place of receptivity, because we spend our lives giving, giving the right answer, the right reaction, the right report, right? It's all chopped up. And when does our culture say to us, here's a time to just receive?
Just, yes,
Yeah.
be.
Yeah. And there's no real clear distinction to be made between receptivity and presence. If you're fully receptive to the moment, you're fully present in it. And so that's one. There's so many little ways of getting at it. And so bit by bit, and one person will have a huge revelation with one exercise, and another person with another. And each exercise impacts differently, but by the end of the weekend,
Seeing it with everybody,
there
I
is
felt like Tommy did. I felt
there is such a
tears,
lovely
but when
energy
doing it
in the
with
room, and
you,
people's faces change.
Change.
It's
They're alive.
remarkable, the light and the softness
the words
and
that have no
it's such a lovely thing.
So I'm thinking about the position that people are in. You're asking people to do something they're not familiar with and that they have no real understanding. And that's to go into this belly brain, or to understand that to some degree, or it's more than understand it. It's to be in the body somehow. So how do you invite them to do this?
It's a funny thing, because babies live there, and our culture kind of drums it out of us. And then there's this tendency in our culture to think of transcending the body in so many
That's
different
right.
spiritual traditions, and even our idea of success has to do not with recovering our wholeness in any way, but these external achievements. And that's so deeply ingrained in our culture that our idea of embodiment is summed up in the phrase, how important it is to listen to your body. And you think about that as a metaphor, listening to your body, it's basically telling you, you know what, you're in one room and your body is next door and there's a wall between you, and it's really prudent once in a while to put your ear to the wall and find out what's going on the other side. So my work is so not about that. My work is about listening to the world through the body. And that happens when you drop down inside the body and recover your sense of felt wholeness. And your wholeness, it's not something you can know with your reason or with your mind. We glorify reason as the supreme kind of accomplishment, but it's impotent in the things that really matter to us. You can't reason your way into love. You can't reason your way into a spiritual experience. You can't reason your way into the present. If reason can't even bring you into the present, then obviously it's a secondary role in our human experience. And that experience of listening to the world through the body is one that takes, it's the heroic journey. If you think about it, right?
It's a heroic journey.
It's the heroic journey.
It's the real heroic journey.
Yeah. Down into all that neglected intelligence, and you begin it with friendship and love and gentleness, and when that energy is released, it renews your whole experience of yourself. But what happens as a result of that is you then open your eyes to the world, and the world is just a different place. It's a wonderful thing.
Well, I want to thank you for having this time with me to talk to you, and for all the people who will view this and hear about your book and want to read it and understand it.
Thank you so
Thank
much,
you.
Raven.